Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Corequisite Project Summer Learning Series. And be sure to look for, we're going to have a different topic every Friday through August 14th and some additional topics. I'll be sending an email out later today with kind of some of what's coming up next in the next few weeks. And today we're going to hear from Paula Talley and Dana Brewer. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then they'll get started. Thank you for joining us today. As a manager of professional learning for higher ed at the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin, Paula Talley provides leadership and oversight of the professional learning tools, products, and services for the Dana Center Math Pathways, a transformative redesign and modernized entry-level college math programs through working with states, systems, and institutions. In this role, she develops tools and services that support local leaders and works with external organizations to coordinate and mobilize math pathways efforts, including course redesign, co-requisite supports, and pedagogy. Paula has over 20 years of teaching experience at the secondary and post-secondary level. And we have Dana Brewer, earned a Ph.D. in English from the University of Texas at Arlington in 2015. She serves as a professor of English and Humanities department chair. Her research interests include juvenile literature, motherhood studies, and early American literature. She's a member of the Children's Literature Association and the Society for the Study of American Women Writers, among other organizations. In her spare time, she works with local animal rescue organizations and is an avid runner. So thank you, and we will go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate that introduction. I want to just start with, I know virtually everybody's been on Zoom, probably a million meetings, but I just wanted to start with just an overview of features just in case, because I know a lot of people use Teams and other Google Meet and other means. Just a quick norm setting. This is being recorded. Right now we are up to, have my glasses on, it looks like 56 people. So keep your line muted when you're not talking so we don't hear the background noise. We do have some co-hosts that can, if you're having issues muting or unmuting, you can ask somebody to unmute you if you're having that difficulty. You can click on the participant list if you want to rename your image. I cannot see any images right now because I'm in presenter mode. I do see the list of people, but I can't see any of your nice backgrounds or your animals or people in the background. So if you want to rename your image, just hover over your name and click rename, and you can actually change your name to something else. If you want to raise your hand, it's also in the participant list, so you can raise your hand. You can use the chat feature to add additional comments. I do want to say that this is a learning experience. We're not here just to regurgitate a bunch of information to you. You are one of your biggest resources for what you're doing and what's working well. So I encourage you to be live in the chat. We will save the chat, share ideas with each other, help each other out, ask questions. So please use the chat feature. When you do unmute, be sure to speak clearly. This is interactive. We will have 2 breakout sessions where you'll get to interact in small groups with people. We've done a lot of professional development over the years, and it really helps when you have those small chunks to actually talk with people one-on-one. And when possible, like especially if you're in a breakout room, I know like when we're on a big Zoom like this, it takes a lot of bandwidth. But when you're in a breakout room, start the video just so that you can participants can see each other when you're talking to each other. And then minimize, actually I kind of like all the backgrounds, but minimize background distractions. If I can click here, just some quick norms with this work. We want to make sure equity's central. I want to make sure in these conversations we're looking for solutions and not blame. We're focusing on systems, not individual people. Everyone on this webinar has expertise. I want you to be honest with your conversations, and when you're in your breakouts, share your talk time. So we're going to talk about the role of the campus coordinator. We're blessed to have Dana here with us to talk about what they're doing at Weatherford College. So I'm going to do an introduction, some brief norm setting, some brief just general talking with you, and then I'm going to let Dana come on and talk about what she's doing, and then we'll end with some final remarks from me. And really thinking about when you're going through this, some specific action steps that you can do. I encourage you to have, I'm sure many of you do, but have a notepad with those action steps and just kind of keep note of the things that you want to go back on your campus and implement or talk to people about. So just real quick, I just want to start with in the chat, what is the role to you? What is the role of the campus coordinator? And just to expand the thinking, you could answer it as, what do you think the purpose of the course coordination is? And why did if you're implementing, why did you actually implement coordinators? And go ahead, and I'm just gonna be quiet here as people use the chat. So thank you, Tracy, for kicking us off. So again, using the chat to think about what course coordination actually means. So Tracy started us off with rules and regulations for the colleges, gather input for faculty who teach the courses, take this into consideration, make sure everyone's on the same accord. And I'm actually just gonna see, as you're continuing to type, I'm gonna launch a poll. I'm just curious of how many of you actually have a course coordinator. So I think you continue to type, but you should also see a poll that popped up. So I'm seeing the comments come in. People are still answering as I'm narrating as you're answering the question. Okay, so we have a majority of you. Okay, looks like we have a majority of you who've actually answered now. So there's still a couple of people still out, but it looks like, can you actually see my results? Or no, share results, here we go. I think I'm sharing the results. So it looks like majority you have a course coordinator, but there's actually a lot of folks that said no and a lot of I'm not sure. And I bet some of you, the course coordinators, probably also the department chair, who could possibly also being the dean, depending on your size of the college. So the course coordinator varies by institution. Okay. Let me close my poll here. I want to start with, I have some quotes that I want to share with you. All the resources are going to be, all the references are going to be at the end of the presentation so you can access later. But this is from, this article was an analysis of 4 studies on retention, but it could easily be about student success as well. So consistent findings across all 4 studies strongly suggest that student characteristics are major contributors to attrition. At the risk of oversimplification, students were better prepared, they had better study skills, if they were more decisive, if they were more committed, if they had sufficient financial resources, then if they had all this, then there would be little concern about student attrition. We've all wished that our students come to us better prepared. While that would be wonderful, the fact is that our students come to us, we need to think about how can we help them be successful? So I want to start with referring to this. I'm going to go to the next slide here. I want to start with some framing that's going to help us throughout this webinar. oftentimes when we start this work, you see a lot of putting blame on the students. But this is a quote from John Gardner. Some of you might know him from the Gardner Institute. It's disturbing to note that in spite of all we know about student retention, that students are inclined to hold students responsible for their retention and attrition, while dramatically minimizing the institutional role. So placing that blame on the students provides for excuses and stymies finding the solutions. So yes, the students do actually have responsibility, but we have responsibility as well. We know the students come to us with many inequitable experiences in K-12, but when they come to us, we need to think about how we can support them in overcoming those inequitable experiences. I want to put this, some of you attended the session last week with Desi. I want to put this in an equity framework to help us move forward with this work. So Ben Simone with the CUE, the Center for Urban Education, has described the response to these educational inequalities in the terms of these mental modes, these cognitive frames that I'm going to show you in just a second. These frames typically function below our consciousness. So there are interpretive lenses that we acquire through our education, through our experience, through our socialization, and they help us with our sense making of the world. These are important because they help shape how we define a problem and preferred solutions. So if I look at the way Ben Simone characterized this, I'm going to look at deficit and I'm going to look at equity frames. So if we look at a deficit cognitive frame, the inequality is attributed to the cultural stereotypes, the cultural deficits, the inadequate socialization, or that lack of the student motivation. It's attributed to the external causes beyond the control of the practitioners. Whereas if we actually change this to an equity cognitive frame, it's where the inequalities is viewed as unnatural. It's a problem of the institution. It's a product of unconscious racism and practices and policies and beliefs, and it's actually solvable. So if you come to this with this equity framework, it's not placing the blame on the students, it's how can we solve this to make this a better experience for them. And if we remember, these cognitive frames actually typically function below our consciousness. So we're going to have to try to surface these beliefs by inspecting our own actions and reactions. So this is where good course coordination can have an impact on your faculty perceptions and giving strategies for helping and keeping the students, that retention, those developing their skills. If we design more flexible, consistent, accessible, and equitable learning experiments, it's going to have profound effects on all learners. So I'm going to look at this quote here. By characterizing and stereotyping people, we place this undue burden on individuals to adapt themselves in the world, wonderful diversity to inflexible learning environments. So we should instead be expecting more of our own learning environments. We should expect more of our institutions in supporting the students. Now we come back to the bigger picture of thinking about ways we can design, that's the purpose of this webinar, is the ways that we can design the learning environment to support and appreciate that individual variability. So why is course coordination? Many of you actually started typing things in the chat, but why is it important? When you're looking at the equity, it's really important to ensure that they're given those consistent experiences across sections. A lot of us have many faculty teaching the same section. A lot of times those are adjunct faculty. If there's no course coordination, how can you ensure they're having that consistent experience? Is the mastery of the content consistent between the courses? Is the grading consistent? The departmental policies, like in math, are you using, do you use calculators? Active and collaborative learning, is that a part, does that need to be embedded in a course? I mean, is that a practice that is required of your courses? Embedding those non-cognitive skills, those psychosocial factors, that growth mindset. And again, also participating, the course coordination really helps to participate in the improvement of the courses over time. Now that we're in this virtual environment, it's actually more important than ever to ensure that consistent application of alternative grading schemes. I mean, we often hear, how are we going to test? How are we going to do group work? How are we going to do presentations? What's the grading of those things? So we need to support the faculty to ensure that the resources are offered to the students, and support the faculty in helping develop that sense of community and belonging in the classroom. It is more critical than ever in a virtual environment, especially if you're asynchronous and synchronous, really thinking about how can you still do an active and collaborative learning strategies and have that impactful pedagogy in a virtual environment. I've actually been an adjunct for Austin Community College since 2008, and they provide some amazing professional development opportunities for their faculty, especially in the math department. I have a full-time job though. So many times that they would have those offerings, it was when I was working. They do have opportunities for faculty to come at night, but it's, for me to go into the middle of Austin where I live, depending on traffic, it's almost an hour drive. So you're working all day, you know, you're going, if it's not like around when you're teaching, then you're going to the training, then you're driving home and start your next day. So oftentimes it was like, oh, I really want to go, but I'm just not going to do it. But I have to say, this shift to virtual has been amazing. I have participated in so many professional learning offerings that ACC's done since the shift to COVID, and I've learned so much. And taking that opportunity to learn with what's happening right now and embedding that and using that in the future. So I just wanted to do some setting the stage of the importance, just our framework with this work, the importance of course coordination. And I want to turn this over to Dana to talk about how she's doing it in her department at Weatherford College.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. And before I talk too much about what we've been doing, I just want to briefly give you some information about Weatherford in case some of you may be unfamiliar with the institution itself. It is a two-year college. We actually have just recently been granted a four-year degree, which is amazing. But we have about a little over 5,000 students, multiple campuses. We have an exceptionally large service area. Most of our students, Weatherford itself has grown quite a bit. If you live in Tarrant or Dallas County, you might be a little bit more familiar with it. But it is still in many ways rural. And one of the reasons that that's important is because in addition to being an open enrollment institution, so we have a lot of equity issues immediately, we also have to deal with limited internet access, limited accessibility, and things of that nature. We also do not have a course coordinator. So again, back to that poll, I'm in that 50%. That's either no or I don't know, except I know that the answer is no. Also, the Humanities department itself, just to give you a quick overview of that, is I have English, Spanish, philosophy, but not developmental writing. And that's going to be important as I move on. So you'll see that as we go to the next slide. But I just wanted to, again, provide a little bit of information for you about the college itself. Okay, so part of the reason, of course, that we had to create solid co-rec classes was because of House Bill 2223. But in addition to that, we wanted to be able to take the opportunity to do something so that we, looked at it as an opportunity. So what could we do with this situation so that we can expand beyond simply meeting a state requirement, for instance? And how can we work together between departments to make sure that we're doing that? And actually, our developmental chair will be taking some of this model and applying it with social sciences in terms of history and so on and so forth. So that's kind of my first point here. Make sure, I would suggest looking at it certainly as an opportunity, encourage faculty to think of it that way as well. We definitely looked at our syllabuses ahead of time and tried to figure out exactly what we wanted to align, what was important. And then I have later on, I'll talk a little bit about assessment, but, or in just a little bit actually. But considering what to do with assessment and how to align assessment, or connect assessment to the aligning of the courses, I think is really important. We also decided we wanted to really focus a lot on past student success rates and look for specific, curricular responsibilities between the institutions. So for example, one of the things that we decided was, because in our particular institution, we really wanted to make sure that we were preparing students more fully for 1302, so freshman comp 2, or technical writing, depending on the direction that they needed to take. And then also, we really, because of that, wanted to focus specifically on critical reading skills, which also allowed us the opportunity to not just look at one assignment and say, this is the assignment that we're going to align, but to really think about how skills and developmental classes and what we were doing in the English classes aligned. Let me also say that often, in every case except for one, the people faculty teaching, it's two different faculty members. So we have English faculty and we have developmental faculty. So these people all have to work together, right? So different goals, different styles, and sometimes we had faculty working with multiple developmental instructors. So one of the things that we decided too, as we were figuring out what we wanted to do with this opportunity, was to look at some modalities, as we were talking about, or as I mentioned just a second ago. The access to internet resources can be somewhat limited for some of our students. So we wanted to really make sure that we weren't focusing too much on online only offerings, which is kind of funny because of where we are now. But we in the past had used an 8-week model with an NCBO course, and then the students were sort of able to transition, and so it was mostly online, is my point. So we wanted to kind of evolve beyond that and then come back around, which is sort of where we are, and I'll get to that in a second too. So we didn't have a specific common assignment, but like I said before, we really looked at skills and trying to align goals with existing assignments. And then we wanted to make sure that what we were assessing or what we were focusing on, so critical reading, would really connect with the courses that were coming up, 1302, technical writing. So what we chose to do was really emphasize annotation skills. And when I talk about things like zeroing in on specific skills, that's not to say that we weren't doing all the other things we need to do, but when we were trying to figure out how best can we determine how successful we are, let's focus on a few items, and one of those was annotation, which can easily be supported in a developmental environment and also used and is definitely needed in 1301 and then of course beyond. So what we had to do was really think about our mission statements for the specific departments, for the disciplines, for the courses, as well as the institution. And fortunately, I mentioned assessment just a second ago, because I was lucky enough to be one of the inaugural participants in Talley, the consortium leadership training for assessment. We had all kinds of mission statements. If anyone's familiar with that, then you know what I mean. We spent a lot of time writing mission statements to make sure that and then we were able to kind of compare those. So my question to you is what's here in this activity, which is, when you're thinking about your particular institution, what are some of the mission statements of the courses? If you've got one in mind that you're thinking about, you need to align, you're going to use your course coordinator for, whatever it happens to be, selecting a course and thinking, or a department, and thinking about what is the mission statement for that department, for the institution itself, if you're unfamiliar with, or you don't have them on a departmental level yet, whatever it happens to be. I'm just kind of curious as to what are some of your mission statements and how we might compare some of those. So I'm going to lean on Paula to kind of walk us through how we're going to discuss this.
I think on this one, Dana, we talked about they could just type in the chat for this particular piece.
Yes, okay, thank you.
And if you have, so if you can type in the chat, but if somebody wants to raise their hand and talk about this out loud, please do that too, so that we can have a couple of folks share out. Y'all are a quiet group today. Any brave souls want to speak to this?
I know there are some mission statements. There we go.
This is Lucy. We have a mission statement, a vision statement, and an equity statement for the college, but don't believe that we have a mission statement for each of our departments.
So is there anything that helps? Is there a, Lucy, do you have like a summary or some characteristic words that you can remember from that?
I think there is, in our equity statement, we do talk a lot about what we want the college to do to support equity. In the mission statement, it is really to, I guess some phrases from there is to allow for the community of El Paso to have resources for an education to better their lives, their education themselves. So, but I don't know. They're not mentally right now in my mind.
I completely understand, and I totally put you on the spot, and I appreciate your response.
I can look them up and find them for you right now very quickly.
I think someone actually copied it over. Right.
It looks like you do have a mission statement for a department listed.
Yes, there's one for a department for sure in here. So I see a lot of student first ones and lifelong learners reaching out to the community. Mm-hmm. Right, and of course we did look at our SLOs as well, and that's kind of what I was getting at too, was trying to think about ways to expand sort of beyond, just what we're required to do. So looking at the characteristics and personality of the institution as well as we certainly at Weatherford have a very keen interest in reaching out to the community and connecting what we're doing with workforce, for instance, getting people into the community. In fact, the president's most recent statement op-ed is on, getting people back into jobs, basically. But okay, excellent. So right, so we have a lot of, thank you all. We have a lot of equity, a lot of student first as well, which is great. So let's move on to the next one, which has to do with assessment, and that's going to kind of align with some of these ideas, especially in regard to, I think, personal responsibility is a little bit tricky to evaluate or assess. Am I the only one who thinks that? Anybody else say yes? And I'm referring to the state requirement. So that's part of why we chose this one. Again, I guess we just like to challenge ourselves, but when we were thinking about if we're going to really spend some time, focusing, taking the opportunity to test something, what would that be? And in this case, personal responsibility. So we chose looking at DIRW courses already have attendance requirements, as most of you probably know or use yourselves. And so English, though, we like to kind of look at things a little bit more holistically sometimes, right? We like things to be squishy. So how can we combine those two and see what kind of success we get so that we're able to determine, as in the English, in humanities really, we have a hard time with what do we do with personal responsibility, because we really don't feel like simply coming to class demonstrates personal responsibility. So this gave us the opportunity to compare the same students, but kind of look at how they evaluate their non-cognitive performance a little differently. Okay, so we looked at kind of their attendance, their class contributions, and how they identified areas that were causing them confusion. So areas where we had them, sort of rank where they felt like they needed some work, where they felt really comfortable, and then look at how, they were in the process of helping to make sure that they were kind of, sorry, I saw a chat and then I was like, oh, that's a really good point. But how they were involved in the process of kind of improving themselves. Or I should say their skills. Okay, so what I think is happening is I'm getting some ideas of how people are doing personal responsibility to share their work with others and participate in learning groups and communities while in the classroom. Yeah, and we often use that for teamwork when that was one that was required of us, especially in regards to peer review. So, but yes, definitely, that's all connected. Okay, so let's move on to kind of some of my advice in the planning, because I wanted to set up that that's what we did with assessment, because in a second I'll talk about some of the results. So as Paula mentioned quite a bit, having people who are coming from a position of equity. And I said here, targeting interested and knowledgeable faculty. And they really have to be committed to those ideas. They're not interested in looking at anything other than what they can do to really help the students succeed. And especially considering, again, where we can support where students are at this moment, basically. Share materials early and often. This is something, I know somebody said just a second ago that, you know, they don't really talk like this across departments. We didn't necessarily either. That's a whole discussion for a completely different day, but getting people to share materials I know can be challenging sometimes. So doing it kind of early, often, in small doses, I think helps a little bit. Consider polling the faculty. I love Outlook forums. I don't know about everyone else, but it's a great tool. You can set anonymous, you know, set the polls so that they're anonymous. You can get long answers, you can get short answers. It puts it right into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can share it with people. It's wonderful. And I say be honest. Make sure that you're really thinking about what it is. You know your limitations as an institution. How are you going to address some of those? How much can you change in the immediate? And where are there going to be sticky points? And kind of think about those ahead of time, I think is important. Even when this last point, because it has to be faculty driven, or it should be in order to be successful. And I know that that's challenging sometimes because coordinating people is difficult, but as chairs and directors, I feel like to have the most success, our meetings, especially in the beginning, Shannon Stoker's her name, she and I met a bit, but it was really more about how are we going to get faculty together to talk so that they're driving some of our plans. Okay, so let's move on to kind of the next point. What did we do after we got some information, you know, kind of what did we do? How did we look at it? And I'm actually looking at some of the comments that came up in chat. So yes, actually, Bridget says when we meet, we talk about what works in our classrooms. And I love this because this kind of leads directly into the first point, which is about discussion groups. So one of the things that I did this year was my third year, I think, as chair. So one of the things that I did this year was I kind of created discussion groups for a variety of topics. These were optional for people to participate, issues related to 1301, issues related to literature, whatever. But we also applied this to what was happening with the co-rec classes, in addition to having other meetings so that the co-rec faculty were talking to each other, essentially, okay? The thing about discussion groups is it's kind of nice term to use. People don't necessarily consider it a formal meeting. I didn't really take minutes. If there was something that we needed to address, we did. And I actually found that they were much more successful than having formal meetings, to be honest with you. So some of the things that we were able to address in that setting was making sure that students had access to course material. We didn't realize who didn't have access for what reasons, and that really helped us having other faculty determine why students didn't have, you know, text, how could we get them to them, that sort of thing, or other material as well. We also figured out that our class sizes, we were able to split our cohorts in the beginning, which if you can do this, especially if you're implementing something new, and if you can petition for smaller class size, And I'm sure there are some administrators who are like, don't say that. But if you can petition for a smaller class size, I think it helps to really, be able to evaluate your results a little bit better. Anyway, we were able to start out with 20 instead of 24. Then we switched that because we knew we needed to increase anyway. And we tried to make them half and half. But what happened was, if you don't have a strong enough, if you don't have enough students on the developmental side, then the class itself is kind of small, and you sort of end up defeating the purpose of the co-rec goal in the first place, basically. So that was something that we were also able to do. We looked at their success rates, student success rates, their surveys, and their reflections. Where DIRW students were asked to rank levels of competence and understanding, what we did with our English courses was really related to that critical reading, the annotations that we were doing, okay? So we asked them reflection type questions. Do you feel that you understand and remember most of what you read or read at the beginning? And then asking them toward the end of the semester, thinking back on some of that, how have practices and annotations improved reading skills? And if they haven't, what do we need to do to make sure that they are in the future? Like, what suggestions can you provide, or what do you think would be helpful? What would have helped you with the annotation practice? On a side note, in most of my class, in all of my classes actually at this point, I do survey students throughout them, and asking that question has proven to me to be exceptionally valuable. If I can ask students, what type of material would have helped you understand this particular activity better, they usually tell me something I haven't thought of, but often they tell me I can figure out what I've already done and what they're missing. And sometimes it's not even a new activity, but maybe just a different way of approaching it. So definitely, I love those student surveys throughout courses are highly successful or effective, I think. I just want to see something that was set down here. Okay. Okay, excellent. All right, let's go on to the next one where we're going to do, yes, a breakout activity. So kind of related to this idea of working with student reflections, which some of you sort of, it looked like we're already starting to think about down there. This is the activity itself. The question is, and I'm really curious about this. Paula and I talked about this, and I was like, I'm really excited about this one because I want to find out, if you have some excellent methods of student self-assessment, I would love to hear some of them, especially because we're so inclined usually just to do surveys and reflections. But there are other ways that we can evaluate or have them evaluate how they're doing, basically. So I'd love to hear some of those, or if you have a great reflection activity, that as well. Good questions, way to write questions, that sort of thing. Paula, I'm going to let you walk us through this one.
You're about to see, I see some folks jumping off and talking about that collaborative learning here. Take advantage of your colleagues and share ideas, and we're going to come back and share. So I'm going to open all rooms. You will go in there with, there's going to be 6 people in a room, do a quick introduction, reporter, timekeeper. When we come back, we'll have a few groups actually share out. So you're going to see a little join breakout room. So go ahead and join away. Okay. So the first group, somebody would like to share out something?
Hi, this is Rebecca Rios Harris from Dallas College, Cedar Valley campus. Bridget brought up peer workshopping for self-assessment because the students are going to have to look at their papers, with certain criteria in front of them. And she says that works out really well, especially with the rubrics. Students can actually are asked to look at rubrics and self-assess their papers to see where they fit into the rubric setting. So if it's an ABC, whether it's a 1, 2, 3, whatever rubrics we use, that's how she says that she actually does self-assessment, as well as has them self-assess, for example, thesis statements. How well can you find it? Once you found it from someone else's, is it, is it strong? Is it weak? What do you need to do to improve it? So that was Bridget Walton's. What I shared that I had done was I give active reading questions for every reading assignment that the students have to do, because so many of them are really kind of bashful about reading. Some of them say they don't like it or they're not good at it. And so to keep them involved, I give the same set of questions, but of course the readings change throughout the semester. And I will ask them I'll break them up by, if there are 4 different readings in the class, in the assigned readings, 4 essays, for example, and I have 20 students, there will be 5 students per essay. They get to pick theirs, so it's first come, first serve. And then they have to answer what is the thesis, name 1 strength in the reading, 1 weakness, 1 thing you would change, 1 thing you learned, and 1 application to your life today. And they do that so they self-assess where they are, if they're reading it properly, if they're being active readers versus passive readers. And it also holds them accountable, because if we're in class, they get up in front of the class as a group, because those 5 people chose that essay. Or over video, we do it this way. And then they present, and it works out really well, because they know that they have other people that are reading it with them, per se. And it also holds them accountable. And I give them feedback as they're presenting, so that they know where they are.
Thank you, Rebecca. And if anybody has any additional ideas from the group that want to share in the chat, or any questions for Rebecca and her group, please feel free to use the chat to do that. So what's an idea? So Hoda's group, what's one thing that your group talked about? And I'm just randomly picking the first person. So I don't know who your spokesperson is, but the one idea that you discussed.
I wrote down, I was the recorder, so I can speak for our group. And
thank you, Polly.
Hoda from Austin Community College shared an idea that we talked about. She said that from an outline, so prior to an exam review session, from an outline of topics or a syllabus for the exam that which she gives to the students, she has them make their own exam review and bring it to the session to share with her and the other students. And then they work out the problems and they discuss whether that is a good review for the exam, and they share solutions and whether that's gonna, they can ask her, or they can ask the other students, is this a good review problem for the test? And we thought that was a good strategy, a good self-assessment, because it helps them. They're summarizing and synthesizing, and that's not one I'd heard before.
Yeah, and you can actually do that in any subject, so that's a great idea.
Right.
Okay, so thank you, Polly. And others, please, if there are other ideas, continue to load the chat with great ideas. Looks like it's Becky's group, but I think Becky has volunteered. Is it Corrine? Am I saying that correct, to speak up?
Yes, that's fine. I'm Corinne Caruso. Our team had some really good strategies that you may have heard before, things like the snowball and think, pair, share. But I think the one that stood out the most to me, Daniela had an idea that she works with her students in, I believe it was history courses, history and English, and but she mentioned it's called NOAA. And so what she does is she has them note take and outline and annotate and highlight. And the unique part was that as the students are keeping track of their notes, she provides notes that they're taking and annotating and working on. She has at the very end them highlight things that are important in yellow, and then they end up going back and highlighting some things in blue. And so when it turns green, those are test questions. So I thought that was a very unique strategy. I think we all thought that was neat. I hadn't heard that one before, and she may want to share a little bit more about it. It's a very nice idea.
So, I mean, as I mentioned to my team, I mean, on campus, it's kind of like team of one, right? That's me. I'm the one that does the history component with the Corex and the CRW class, which is the integrated reading and writing, and also English 1301 and the integrated reading and writing class. So I do both. So what I do with my regular history classes, I teach it the way a regular history person is going to teach history, which is, you know, they're coming in and they're supposed to have read already. But what I do tell them at the beginning is I give them the little snippet of Noah, which I normally do in the CRW class. Except that this summer, I did not have a CRW paired with history. I just taught a standalone history course. So I know that my regular students also need the important information on critical reading, which is also part of active note-taking. So when we talked about notations at the beginning, I thought that's so important, because in order for my students to really grasp the concept, they have to be able to write about it. And I think that teaching students how to be able to do that effectively through note-taking with a purpose makes much more difference, to, at least to my students, because I frame it in terms of history is a telenovela, right? Because they've been raised on this. And soap opera, I mean, who did what to who? Who's the main character at the end? Who are the casualties? So my PowerPoints are always in that vein. I kind of tell them that this is, you know, the first couple of chapters is these main characters had stuff done to them. So let's kind of look at it through that lens, right? And so with Noah, which is basically stands for notes, outline, annotations, and highlighting. That's how I break apart. And I tell students, you can do all four and I can guarantee that your grade is going to be a lot higher than if you don't take any notes. Or you can do 2 out of the 4 and you'll still see some benefits to it. But for me, Noah just works really well. And that's one of the parts that I really spend a lot of time on in the developmental course, because it doesn't matter what course they take, whether it's history, whether it's chemistry, whether it's anatomy and physiology, these note-taking skills are essential in any, you know, class.
Thank you. And let me have, I know we have 9 groups here, but let me have, for time's sake, let me have one more group volunteer to share out, and the other ones, please share your ideas in the chat. So if somebody wants to raise their hand to share out in one of the remaining 5 groups, I think there were 5, maybe 6 groups. Anybody? I can't see hands. Anybody volunteering to share out one other idea? Okay, and just if not, that's okay. Just continue to share your ideas in the chat, and that is one of the important pieces of course coordination. There might be many of your faculty doing some very innovative things. So how can you come together and learn from each other and actually create that environment where you have consistency, where more students are actually experiencing some of those learning opportunities in those courses? So just really thinking about that course coordination as you're sharing these ideas. I am going to send it back to Dana for one more slide.
Thank you guys. That was, I enjoyed talking with my group as well. It was funny, I didn't know I was going to be put in a group than I was. But one of the things that we did talk a little bit about too was something I did already mention, which was, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things that we did discuss was using surveys throughout the course for sure. And the importance of that in terms of getting student feedback that you can actually then turn around and apply immediately. So I'm going to kind of carry that idea over with this final piece here. I think, oh, and then there's another question about, hold on, there's a comment about surveying, so. Right, yes, and surveying about specific assignments too, I think that's really helpful. I've actually adjusted some assignments, especially in technical writing, which is a course where a lot of times I have students who have actually already been in the business world and they're coming back. So technical writing, if anyone teaches it, there's elements of technical writing, but it's also business and professional writing. So sometimes through some of their experiences, which are, you know, I obviously don't work in the business world because I work in academia. So getting some of their feedback has certainly been helpful too. So this to me is kind of the exciting part of everything. So everything that we did was challenging, getting people to, agree to talk to each other, to work together, to understand that we had a common purpose and goal, can be, a little challenging sometimes. We started with a smaller group of faculty doing this. There were only about 3 English instructors. We have so many co-rec classes right now that and multiple instructors too. I think we have 7. We've added an adjunct. We're adding modalities. And so, when I was doing the scheduling for this term for the fall, well, this was pre-COVID, but when I was doing that scheduling for the fall, it was kind of like, wow, I'm not sure how I'm going to make all this work. We have so many people who are teaching and willing to teach co-rec classes now. And again, like I said, we're expanding them. We're going to bring that 8-week back in. When we looked at our spring course evaluation surveys and which is based on the IDEA surveys, we saw that one of the areas that we needed to focus on had to do with students' ability to address the course objectives and their own success, which was excellent because we already had that model that was kind of being developed through the co-rec classes, especially in this last year. So what that means is that I'm able to take, and we've already talked about this as a department for all of the English courses anyway, well, all the humanities courses actually, we're incorporating some idea, some element of student reflection. In most cases, it will be something written, but that will be part of the total evaluation for, that students will be responsible for doing some of that, and then we'll kind of review those. When I say that was an area we chose to work on, we weren't doing horribly in it. It was just one of those, where we were like, well, we could do, a little bit better. It was the one that was the lowest, it wasn't that low, but still. But I think that that's important to think about and something that we're going to be using as we move forward. So my point is that this experience helped to inform something that we could do that was connected to student evaluation feedback that we got. So we're able to apply this stuff across. We're not just doing one. It's not isolated, I guess is what I'm getting at. And then, just one second. Right, and so just as we move forward, it's become, and what I'm trying to do and what Shannon's trying to help me do is, and we're trying to get faculty involved too, make sure everyone's on board with this, but we're trying to make things, the courses not be isolated at all in any way whatsoever, so that we all have the same conversation. So I'm not necessarily separating instructors who are teaching co-rec classes from conversations just about 1301 in general. Of course, those people are still in the same room, but often we still have conversations that are unique to those classes. We need to incorporate it all of it more and really just kind of make it part of both departments. It is in practice, but we're working on that sort of in theory gap too. So final notes, faculty driven, plan, early, organize, share information, and reflections I think are really important. Holding yourself accountable for the reflections as well. That was one of the points that when we were thinking about students, and them ranking themselves on how well they achieved course objectives, was if they even knew what the course objectives were. Did we actually write them on the board, or the assignment objective? Did we actually write it on the board in addition to it being in the instructions? Did we talk about it? How much did we make that part of the course? And I think that that also relates to equity, because sometimes we need to make sure that, we're driving some of those conversations. So that is basically what I have to say. I'll turn it back over to Paula. Thank you all. I really enjoyed, I'm going to go read some more ideas. So I hope some of that was helpful for you as you move forward too.
Thank you, Dana. And I do want to say, especially with the shift to virtual, a lot of faculty, they shifted this virtual without any experience or training because it was just this fast movement. But asking your students, like flat out, I asked my students, what is this working well? What do you want me to do differently? And really taking that time to reflect with the students and get their input. They can be very valuable, and take that information back to your department, especially with your co-rec sections, if you have different faculty teaching the different sections or different experiences, it's really important to have that, that community as you're moving through this. And I think that gets to just our DCMP. DCMP, for those who don't know, the math world, that's Dana Center Math Pathways Philosophy Professional Learning. I think that applies to this course coordination. This from research, faculty really want development that's continuous, builds collegiality, creates groups of faculty who observe and discuss teaching regularly, and honors the internal expertise and is actually very collaborative. So professionals want to learn from each other. They want to engage with each other. This virtual environment actually helps a lot with that. They want the chance to practice and reflect on the new learning and engage structured activities over time. I don't know how many workshops I've attended or sessions I've attended where, oh, that's a great idea, but I didn't have a chance to really come back and reflect and learn from others. So really taking that opportunity to reflect together and grow together as a department and across departments with your learning. This is actually from Eiler. This is a quote for student learning, but keep this in mind when you're doing your course coordination. It's the same for us as professionals too. We're social human beings, and our learning needs to be front and center in the learning process. It needs to be actively engaged. So as a department, think about how you can structure your shared learnings with your colleagues. Think about how you're going to implement your practices so they're consistent, that consistent experience over time, and think about the continuous improvement. So just looking at course coordination, the policies, a lot of this, I don't even think I need to say this, but just things to keep in mind. Are you going to provide a syllabus template with section-wide policies? Are y'all going to go through, or are you actually going to walk through the syllabus together with all of your faculty? Are they going to have sample syllabi and calendars for faculty to use? Are you going to have materials that's going to be used in all the courses, or supplemental material? How detailed is your policies? How are they going to be across your institution? And I wanted to bring this up because when we talk about the multiple means of representation, especially in this virtual environment, we can do a whole nother series about universal design, and I don't really want to go into that, but I want us to think about the syllabus and being equity-minded. Sometimes the syllabus referred to as a contract, but especially in this virtual environment, the syllabus is the first step in building that relationship between you and each student. So you want to make sure as you're redesigning, doing this course coordination, really make sure that minoritized students see themselves in the syllabus, in the assignments, in other instructional materials. Sorry, my breakout room, I got to move my breakout room, and it's over my screen here. Make it visible in, I cannot minimize the screen. My students are used to this. I talk myself through as I'm trying to figure out some kind of technology issue. Make it visible in your text, your videos, your teaching artifacts. Create a learning plan to become familiar with minoritized writers or poets or scientists or mathematicians. And this is where that course coordination comes in handy. Pick something that you want to work on, and as a department, kind of divide and conquer with faculty and come back together and come to a consensus of what you're wanting to embed into your syllabus and into your course. So this is again from Ben Simone. For racially or, and I can't even read now, ethnically minoritized students who've experienced exclusion, marginalization, discrimination, and oppression in educational settings and elsewhere, the syllabus is a tool. So it is a tool that faculty can use to intentionally demystify the implicit norms, ambiguous progress for success. A lot of experience at your institution that you can reach out together. Not all students do, and it's part of the job, not all students see themselves in this, and it's part of our job to actually get them there and help them navigate the implicit norms of the college that cannot be emphasized enough. So especially again in this virtual environment. trying to help them see that they're relevant and they belong. This is an example. This is in your, I won't say in your notes, but in the references. I always say it wrong. Peralta, it's a college, they have a well-known equity rubric that I encourage you as a department to actually go through. It really goes through and looks at the equity implications of technology, of the student resources supports, the universal design, diversity, inclusion. So this is a whole nother conversation, but I wanted to post this here because it's really important as a department that you go through and think about as you're redesigning your syllabus, what you can actually do. Here is an example. This is a redesigned syllabus from Cuyamaca College. This is their co-rec statistics course. I know it's probably small on your screen, and I will provide this access to this. I apologize.
It's her dogs.
Somebody rings the doorbell as I'm doing a presentation. They've been so nice and calm, and here we go. But hopefully you had a chance to read this as I'm looking for the dog. But if you look at this, look at the opening message of this syllabus. It's welcome to statistics with support. I believe we all have the capacity to do college level statistics, and we can tap into that capacity as a family of teachers and learners. So think about your traditional syllabus. Cuyamaca is the one, Peralta. Peralta, I always say it wrong, Peralta, and I have a link to it in the references where you can actually click on it. Oh, I'm glad the dogs are paying attention. Yeah, if I get a dog barking on the screen, I often have the dogs bark too. But so this is an example of how you can change into an equity-minded syllabus as you're looking at the course coordination. Maybe some individuals at your institution are doing this on their own, but can you create a model that can be done across courses? Here's just, I picked a piece off of their attendance too. You might have your attendance policies that you have to have within your course. And yes, you need to list those because they're mandated. But look at this when they're talking about attendance here. In this class, we function as a team, teaching and learning together in small groups that are frequently reorganizing during each class period. So again, letting them actually see that, oh, if you must attend class, and if you don't attend so many sections, you're going to be dropped from the course, having that deficit language, really thinking about how you can change this to be more asset-based, really helping the students when they come in, when they see that syllabus, they can say, I belong in this course. I can be successful in this course. And thank you for posting that, Carolyn. Again, with your course coordination, you probably have some faculty that are doing this already, and maybe you don't know it. So how can you come together and actually and come up with an equity-minded syllabus? When you're thinking about the coordination, this next one is this is an example of an aligned calendar. When you're thinking about course coordination, this is a whole nother activity too around back mapping and alignment. But if you have faculty, are they on a similar calendar? Do you have support faculty? This is an example from I've closed the door and my dog is now pounding to get in, my little 10-pound miniature dachshund. So I apologize, this one more time.
I don't have any dogs. I just have a sneezy cat. She has allergies, but I made sure she wasn't in here. So I taught one day with her in here, and one of my students was like, now my dog's barking because of your cat.
Yeah, I often see cats walk across. But this is an example where course coordination comes down to the granular detail of when you're teaching each topic in the courses. This is an example for Roane State, and the reason why they did this is they had a lot of adjuncts actually teaching their support courses, and they didn't have like the same person teaching the courses. So as a department, Roane State got their faculty together and they created this workbook that each faculty member had, and they had commingled classes. So that's why it was very important to structure the calendars that everybody was pretty much on at the same time. Again, to ensure that consistency. They had common assignments, they had common assessments. I mean, that's getting down to being 100% aligned, but sometimes if you're thinking about the student experience, is that something that's necessary? And of course, as a department, you're going to have to go through those conversations and decide what's best for you. I know in the academia, we have academic freedom, but I challenge you to think about academic freedom in the manner of the inequities that the student experiences across the courses. So really keeping that top of mind. So just a quick policies. Do you have common homework assignments? Do you have common in-class activities? Do you have a common LMS shell, a learning management shell that your faculty use? Or can they take something and modify it? Are there optional policies? All these considerations when you're thinking about that consistent experience for students across courses. When you're talking about the faculty preparation, do you have pre-semester meetings? At Temple College, we used to call them 0-week meetings, weekly or monthly meetings. Do you have pair mentor instructors? Do you have new faculty that when they come on, they actually have a mentor instructor to help them, again, to ensure that consistency? Peer faculty observations. Sometimes it is so unnerving to, or it's hard to think when your department chair has to come in and evaluate you, and you're like you're trying to be tip top for that presentation because you're going to be evaluated on it. But if you really want to learn something, take it as an opportunity of what did I do well? What do I need improved? And maybe not your department chair, maybe it's just a fellow faculty member. Hey, I'm going to try this. Can you come in and observe? And then use that opportunity to actually learn from each other. Those departmental observations, your learning communities, create a learning community. You think about students with learning communities, faculty can also have learning communities, and of course, ongoing workshops and professional development. Yeah, the academic freedom piece. When you're thinking about your assessments, Dana brought up some great ideas about assessments, but are you going to have some common exams, some common projects, group assignments that are going to be used by all faculty? Do you have exam templates? So maybe everybody has different exams, but they have to follow a certain format, project guidelines, group activities. Do you come together as a department and review your grading? How you grade different things? Are you norming it? Are you creating that rubric? And that can go from a math course and an English course or a history course or whatever, even math tests. Some faculty grade it's 100% right or it's 100% wrong. Others give partial credit, but how much partial credit? So how consistent do you want to be? And again, you're thinking about that experience from the student. It takes a lot of work to do course coordination, but you're thinking about the inequities in the student experience from course to course. So that's where it's really key to have that course coordination. We were going to have another breakout where you're actually going to learn from each other. We're not going to have that time left because we only have 10 minutes left. And I'm going to come back to this, but I do want to show you, you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint, but here's a copy of the readings that you can do. And a good departmental reading, by the way, I don't have the book here with me, Teaching Across Cultural Strengths. That is a great book to read, do a book study as a department, because it actually has discussion prompts and different pieces in there that y'all can talk about and discuss. And that's across any discipline. I'm also an Achieving the Dream leadership coach, and I'm coaching a college in Connecticut. And they adopted that book as a college to do a college-wide reading learning community around culturally responsive teaching. And then here's just some tools for you for universal design, which again is a whole nother series of a whole nother workshop in itself, not just a webinar, an ongoing workshop. But what I want to do with these last few minutes that we have, I want you to, it is Teaching Across Cultural Strengths. I'm trying to look around. I read. One of the things I love at my job at the Dana Center is I read and I learn so much from everyone around the country. Here's another book that I was in an Equity by Design workshop, and they suggested, I don't know if you can see this, Grading for Equity. I haven't started it yet, but here's another one that they recommend too when you're thinking about kind of consistent grading. But I'll find the other book in just a minute. So I'm going to stand up and look for the exact name of the book. And actually, I'm going to stop share because if I can actually Google it, I can post it. Oh, did somebody find it? There you go. Thank you, Christy. I am going to stop share though, just so I can actually see you. And I want you to either in the chat or to unmute. This is our chance to learn together. What did you walk away with? Any ideas at all? Any thoughts? What do you want to know more about? Maybe we can follow up with some resources for you. So just in the chat or any open questions, I'm leaving this as your opportunity to ask each other questions, because I must say I'm not the expert in everything. You are the experts. So you can learn a lot from each other. And if you have additional resources, I always try to, you can save the chat afterwards where you save all the resources. I love doing that in these webinars where you can click on the 3 ellipses next to the file button in the chat, and you can actually save the chat. So you can save what your colleagues, what your peers have posted. So I encourage you to share ideas and resources, and what's that action step. You can also, even sharing your action step that you're going to walk away with kind of sparks some thoughts. And like I said, if somebody wants to unmute, feel free to unmute so you're not just listening to me this whole time. Yeah, and you learn a lot of tricks being in these settings about how to engage your students through breakout rooms. I like Zoom the best because you can actually see everybody's faces. Blackboard Collaborate, you can do breakouts too, but you can't move your tiles around so you can see the folks. Please continue to share ideas and thoughts. And I want to thank y'all for taking this time on a Friday afternoon and bearing with me and my dogs. I should have known better. Normally I put the dogs outside, but this Texas heat, I was like, they'll be quiet, they'll be good. And of course it didn't work out. So I have to apologize. A Student Ready College Cultural Leadership, that's a good book. That's one of the things that I've missed going with COVID. Is part of my role at the Dana Center. I get to travel the country and go on college campuses and really learn from faculty around the country with what they're doing. And I never thought I would say I miss traveling, but I actually miss traveling because one of the things I did on the airplane is I'd sit there and have time to read these books. So that was my airplane time, is actually reading. Yep, that's another good one. Reach everyone, teach everyone. It's great for UDL. Perfect. Yep. So resources, Christy, question about where the resources are located on the website.
Yeah, sure thing. I will post that link. They're on our events page. If you just look at the specific event, you might have to go to the previous events, which is in the lower half of the page, and click on that. And I know that Carolyn also posts them on the Texas Corequisite project page. So they're in 2 places.
Okay. I want to, Carolyn, do you have any, as we're continuing to post here, do you have any ending comments or any upcoming?
I just want to say again, look for an email later today. And if you're not on for upcoming webinars in the next few weeks, and if you're not on our Texas Corequisite project listserv, and it's just where we send the announcements out, email me at creed@austincc.edu. I'll put it in the chat also, and I'll add you to that listserv.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Can't believe we're already halfway through July.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Nice meeting everyone.